10th grade biology class. Last lesson, I threw a lot at you guys. I was talking about vocabulary, I was talking a lot. You might have been getting a little lost. I gave you this as homework from last time. Hopefully you get a good shot at it. But I figured it'd be a good idea for us for this lesson to just go over it and talk about it. Maybe we can relate. And you guys can see exactly why these words match up with these definitions, and we'll get a better understanding. And if we have enough time at the end, we'll have an activity that'll get you guys to relate the information more to what I'm trying to teach you. So we're just going to go around. I'm going to ask you question number 1. 2 things about this worksheet. Just ignore question number 5. And for the directions for part 2, it says genotype, phenotype, homozygous, and the other, it shouldn't be recessive, it should be heterozygous. So those are going to be your possible words you're going to use for the answers. So, okay. So Kayla, first question, reproducing organisms have sets of blank chromosomes. So here are your possible answers. We talked about each of these last class. Do you think that you can?
Phenotype chromosomes.
That is not correct. Does anyone else know the answer to question number 1? Reproducing organisms have sets of blank chromosomes. That is correct. Homologous chromosomes. So, essentially what I asked you last time, we had a picture of 2 labs, and one lab was golden and one lab was black. So, I asked you, do you think it's possible that these could have came from the same parents? And a lot of you did think it would be possible if 2 black labs could produce a golden lab. So that's essentially what we're going to keep building on here. So reproducing organisms have sets of chromosomes. So as we talked about before, chromosomes are bunched up DNA in genes, and they're called homologous chromosomes because during the process of meiosis, like we talked about in the last lesson, is split apart and make 2 meaning the same chromosomes, so they're the same. So reproducing organisms like dogs. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so can you answer number 2, please? Read it out loud.
2 chromosomes have the same genes but give different phenotypes. We refer to these variations as alleles.
That is correct. So we're looking at chromosomes, and they're the same, but maybe one has a little bit different than the other one, and it gives maybe a dominant or recessive phenotype like we talked about last time. And we refer to these as alleles. So we have genes, which are what they're producing, so hair color, and then alleles would refer to as maybe black or black. So can you answer number 3, please? Read it out loud.
Position of a gene on a chromosome is called a locus.
That is correct. So locus is just where it is on the chromosome. Lee, can you do number 4?
Yeah. Genotype gives you the genes for a zygote, and a phenotype expresses the physical characteristics of an organism.
Good job. So do you think you can maybe explain what a genotype is? We talked about it last time. What is the difference between a genotype and a phenotype?
Gene has to do with the DNA, and phenotype is more physical.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm looking at a chromosome, and I'm giving the genes or genotype. So gene is genotype, so what it actually is, and then the genotype gives you the phenotype, like we talked about last time in class. Okay, so now we're going to get to the next part of the assignment that we did before. So Deanna, can you do the next one in line?
So wait, so are we at 5 now?
We are at, no, we're going to skip over 5.
Oh, okay.
So now you have, and genotype, phenotype, homozygous, and heterozygous are the possibilities for the next one. So, Kat has green eyes. Is that what what term would we use for a cat that has green eyes?
Would that be it?
No. Does anyone else know what that one might be? Yes?
Phenotype?
It's a phenotype. So it's not a genotype because we don't have the chromosome. It doesn't say on the chromosome. It doesn't say, okay, a cat with green eyes. It's gonna have base pairs that produce proteins that tell us that it has green eyes. And the green eyes is the physical characteristic that's gonna give us phenotype.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
so phenotype, physical characteristics.
Yeah, so yeah, physical and gene. So those are two easy ways that you can remember these two words. So, Jamie, can you do the next one? Yes, it's homozygous. And do you know why it's homozygous? They are the same, right? So B and B represent what on a chromosome? So we talked about homologous chromosomes. They're two of the same chromosomes. So B would refer to, so one of the letter B's would refer to as what B's. We have homologous chromosomes, so BB is our homologous chromosome, and what would big B be? We have two big B's. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? They're, right, they are dominant, but we have big B as an allele. So we have two alleles, that's why we have two big B's. There's homologous chromosomes and there's two big B's, so two alleles. Okay. Is there another possibility that this big B, little c, or big C could be? Jamie said that they were homozygous because they're the same, but is there another word of those four words that they could possibly be? Yes?
Genotype?
Yes, they're a genotype. And why are they a genotype?
How the genes would be written out?
Yeah. They represent what the phenotype is going to be. So if we have two big B's, maybe that would code, because that's what genes do, they code for physical characteristics. They would code for black hair. This would be a genotype. Kayla, can you do the next one? Big A, big A.
Is that also homozygous?
Yes, it is. And it's A. Yeah. It's the same thing as the last one. Does that make sense to everybody?
How come there's only one grouping of?
That's a good question. Does anybody know the answer to that? Why there's maybe one for here and two for the one before that? Does anybody know?
Combination.
Right. Did everybody hear what she said? Sometimes, well, she said different combinations of chromosomes can make different characteristics. So sometimes to make one characteristic, so let's say you need skin color, right? Skin color, there's not like one gene doesn't make all the different hues of skin color. Sometimes two genes have to contribute to make your one characteristic. So you might, for my skin color, it's pale, whatever. You might need two different genes that could make these characteristics. So, okay, let's move on to the next one. Next one is?
Phenotype?
Right, phenotype. Black hair and brown hair is a phenotype because it's what the genes produce. They produce black hair and brown hair. Okay? Heidi, the next one.
Genotype?
They're genotypes. They're the names of genes. So they're what code for a characteristic. Correct? Okay. Lee, can you do the next one? Big A, little a?
Is that heterozygous?
That is correct. They're heterozygous because we know that homozygous means that they are the same two what? two gene, they're the same two alleles, right? We have a big A allele and a little a allele. So since they're different, they're heterozygous. What if it was big A, big A? What would we call it? If it's heterozygous for big A, little a, what would big A, big A?
Homozygous.
Homozygous, right. Okay. All right, and the last two?
Are they
Yeah.
both gonna be phenotypes?
They're both
Because
phenotypes.
they're physical characteristics?
Right, they're physical
Okay.
characteristics, okay. Okay, so, just to wrap this up, we're gonna just do a really quick activity. We're gonna stick with our dragons that we talked about, last class. So, I'm just gonna ask you guys, we're gonna have 3 characteristics, 3 phenotypes, okay? So here are phenotypes. So, we have horns, wings, and we said last class, fire breathing. Okay? Okay. So we're gonna have a dad and a mom. Now can somebody give me a homozygous genotype for horns?
Big H, big H.
Right. Alright, so dad is gonna have big H, big H. Now if it's homozygous dominant, which we'll talk about next time, this means that the organism does, the genotype does have horns. If it was recessive, so if we had 2 little h's, it would mean it doesn't have horns. Okay, and can somebody give me a heterozygous for mom? A heterozygous genotype. Can anybody tell me what phenotype this is going to give me? It's going to give me horns. Why is it going to give me horns? Because because the H allele, right? H allele, that's a tough word to understand, but we're going to keep pounding with it. The H allele is dominant, so if we ever have a dominant allele in our genotype, we're always going to get that phenotype. Okay, so really quick, how about a homozygous recessive genotype for wings?
Little W, little W.
Correct. And what phenotype is that going to give us?
No wings.
No wings, right. And how about for mom? How about a homozygous dominant genotype? Okay, and that's going to give us what phenotype?
Wings.
Wings. Cool. All right, fire breathing. How about a homozygous recessive genotype?
Little F, big F.
Big F, little f, and what phenotype is that going to give us? Yes, why?
Because the first allele is dominant.
Yes, allele. We got that word. Okay. Okay. And now how about a homozygous recessive genotype?
Little f.
And Lee, what phenotype is that going to give us?
Not fire.
Not fire. Okay. And why is it not going to give us fire?
Because there's 2 small f's instead of big F.
What are the F's called?
Alleles.
Alleles. Okay.
Finish time.
That's it.
Okay, let's get some feedback.